So Chellise, it's been a while. I feel like we met 2017 New York City workshop. Um, and yeah, life was changed forever then. No, just kidding.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. How's what has life been like since that time? We'll just hop right into it.
Let me see. We definitely had a team, and in 17, and perhaps that was what we were talking about,
Yep.
on growing a team.
Yeah.
So we definitely had a big class on that. And what's interesting is one of the attendees for that class is now on our team.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
Danny, who I didn't know, at all. He was just there, and I thought it was really wonderful because we were sharing such like intimate internal workings of
Yeah.
managing a team. For him to want to work with us after that was like, I just love the way you like run
Yeah.
your crew internally. I'm all about it. It's like, oh, cool. I'm so stoked we got such an ace. Like he's such an amazing photographer. We got him
Mm.
through that class.
That's
I'm like,
awesome. When it's like that
yeah,
class, and we'll get to it a little bit, but like you were very, at least in my mind, it felt not knowing you guys, but it felt like you had obviously been burned before in the process, right? And working with all kinds of clients and contracts and all that ish. Like every clause in our contract is from a lesson that we learned usually, right? And so, but I could feel it like coming off. I'm like, oh man, like who hurt you guys? But in a, like a good way. I'm like, all right, I know, it's there's been like growing pains, and so for him to hear the nitty gritty and be like, okay, yeah, that actually sounds fine to me. Like
yeah,
that's awesome. You can't buy loyalty. So I love that.
yeah. It's a really difficult thing to do. I would definitely say growing a team is not easy.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody. It actually is not for most,
Mm,
because it's a whole nother role, and you have to be really okay with having hard talks and coaching, and it's not easy. Some people think, oh, I'm just going to bring this photographer on and they're going to make me a bunch of money and I don't have to do any work. It's so not
yeah.
at all that. Um, Everybody's got their way of learning and their way of doing things, and they have to conform to ours, even just like how we require files shared to us
Yeah.
and like the organization, and they like it. So it's like training people and all that. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah, we definitely, I don't want to say we've gotten burned. We've just learned a lot through different personalities and
Mm,
different growing pains with a team. And it's been good for us because like now we know how to handle difficult situations or like see red flags, better questions to ask when we're hiring people, implement better practices with our own like handbook. We have like a online handbook for our crew to
nice.
reference when they have questions like, how do I do upload the Dropbox? How do you want it? There's all
Yeah.
these questions. So it's taught us a lot. So we skimmed down because for a long time we were, a huge crew. We had like five or six. I was going to say five or
That's
six
crazy.
photographers full time. And then, you know, I would say it's a very natural progression for a team to shift and people to go off on their own or get burnt out.
Yeah.
And then, so that naturally happened. And when it started happening, we are like, let's just let it go back to zero and be me and Mike
Yeah.
again so that we can just like reset and reflect on how we are as, owners and how we manage people and just like really take it all in.
Yeah.
So I feel like 2018 was our first year back to just us. And it was
Wow.
really nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the focus back in on like, what are we doing? What's our company? And let's like, just like take a look at it, not be so busy with like managing people.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, then we like kind of put some feelers out there because we wanted to bring somebody back on.
Mm,
And that's when Danny popped up. Um, and then we brought a videographer on,
mm,
and then brought that way we were fine with that. And then during the pandemic, we actually hired another photographer, which
sure.
a lot of people weren't hiring during a pandemic, but it was hugely beneficial to us to have a team
Yeah.
at that point, like major.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's awesome. Well, let's
that's now.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, before yeah, we should talk more about that in a second. But give us for people who don't know who you are, like my first time experiencing both you and Mike, which is an experience of in itself. It was at workshop and met lots of cool people there, lots of good buddies that are still good friends now, or people I look up to, or people, colleagues in the industry, if you will. But give me a little bit of background on just you and Mike, how you guys kind of got started. And I think, for my frame of reference, you guys were in Brooklyn for a long time, but then moved like upstate or something. Like, are you guys like, how's that all work? So give me the whole rundown on the Chellise Michael story.
So Mike and I came from Phoenix in 2010, landed right in Brooklyn, like Bushwick area.
Yeah.
And we just really came at a time of, I think, some like exciting changes in the wedding photography realm. Like that's when it was just like getting cool.
Yeah.
Right. And so we just we had a really great connection with just that whole budding community, Forge in the North and Lev and like all the workshoppers.
Yeah.
And we just really did really well in Brooklyn. It just fed us. We were new to the city. We saw it with like big eyes, and we just kind of rocked it our own way and naturally attracted the types of clientele we want.
That's awesome.
Which is the way you do it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, there is a magic to it, but it just worked. we got there, and yeah, I would say like the community in Brooklyn was just huge for us. A lot of the photographers that you met at workshop and that I know as well, like we fed each other a lot of work and I feel like we all brought each other up.
That's cool.
We still do. So yeah, we were in Brooklyn for 10 years and did really well there. I feel like we grew our team like by 2012 or 13. We after only 2 years, we already brought people on.
Yeah.
And it was kind of crazy because we were like, oh, I don't think we even get enough inquiries, to book someone else. But it was kind of like, if they build it, they will come. And they did. So
that's awesome.
We were just like, let's just try it. So that was really great. And then 5 years into living in Brooklyn, we started, recognizing in ourselves that someday we would want to move outside of the city. And just, we missed nature. We were like, there is a disconnect right now with us and nature. We're in the bubble of New York City, which is like this just intense,
very different
bubble.
There's bushes and then there's Bushwick, and they are very different things.
And with our exposure to weddings up in the Hudson Valley and Catskills, that really ignited us and exposed us to how gorgeous the whole state is. Totally. We were like, oh my God, wait, New York isn't just New York City. We were also exposed to it through our work.
That's cool.
So through our work, we got to navigate a lot of that area and know what we did and didn't like. So around 2015, we weren't in any mood to move yet, but we had saved up money over the years and wanted to buy a home somewhere. We're like, well, we need to do something with this savings, just earning 0.25%.
Yeah, like the worst interest ever.
Right. Doesn't work. So we're like, well, let's buy a house in the Hudson Valley. And even if we don't move into it, at least we have an investment property or something.
Totally.
So we bought a little house up in Newburgh, which is about 60 miles north of the city. So we also strategically were like, something off the train line, close to the city. Yeah. In case we do move there, it'll be great.
Right.
So, long story short, we were landlords for 5 years, just left it alone. And then in 2019, our landlord in Bushwick was like, hey, I want to sell your home that you're renting from me. And it was big. Yeah. It was like a 1,200 square foot duplex. We were like, what are we going to do?
Dang.
Can't downgrade to an apartment. No way. Or for that price, we'd be paying so much money. So we're like, well, I guess this is the sign to get out of here. We're kind of feeling it. We're, again, craving a little mental bandwidth, space, nature. So we literally planned to move March 16th or 17th of 2020. So we planned it for 8 months. We had it all laid out.
Wow.
So the pandemic, we left, and we were already had somewhere to go. So it was really strange. It made it easier to leave because we weren't like very, we were really upset about leaving still. We weren't emotionally ready to break up with Brooklyn. We didn't want to.
Yeah.
But we kind of got like this nudge. And now looking in hindsight, I just think it was all like supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And once we got up here, we were like, wait, what were we whining about? This is amazing. This is so nice.
Yeah.
We just feel like we have the best of both worlds because I'm, an hour 20 to Grand Central on a train. I don't have to drive.
That's awesome.
And yeah, we live in a city, so it's not like a little town. It's got everything we need. So I don't have to go anywhere far to get basic or go eat at restaurants and stuff. So we're loving it.
That's cool.
And when we did that in 2015, we also started shifting our SEO within our website and our hashtags on Instagram to reflect more of upstate photography in weddings. So we started getting more inquiries so that now we have like a 50-50, which is exactly what we wanted. We wanted half Brooklyn, half upstate Hudson Valley and Catskills.
That's awesome.
Because we are still Brooklyn based. Our company, we still put on there Brooklyn based because we're really proud of that. It takes a lot of hard work to get established in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
So there's like no way we're taking that like badge of honor off.
Yeah.
Brand. So, we shoot there all the time. I was just there yesterday. I'll be there again next week, 2 or 3 times.
Sure.
So it's just like a normal thing for us now to go into the city, but we just live up here. So
that's cool. Yeah. I feel like that. I didn't notice this when I first started because I started my business outside of a city, but like now I live in DC, like in the district. People always ask what it's like. We live in DC. Same with New York. They're like, do you live in the city or do you live, people are like, nah, I live in Jersey. And you're like, no. But there's something about like making it in a city, and like, no matter where you're at, I feel like that is just so, it's mostly internal, right? Like it's internal for you. And like, no, I know what we did and I know what we had to do to make it here. And like living in a city is hard and nobody always talks about that. But like my wife always jokes that like getting groceries is a difficult thing. There's like so many things I have to think about to just go get groceries, especially if you don't have a car and you're like, parking lots? No, like nobody is parking at the parking lot. So it's like all these things. And then you're like, oh, you want to chase your dream, which is a privilege anyway, and like build a business on that? Screw you, and you're like, no, I'm going to make it. So no, I think that's totally fine. I'm proud of you guys. I think that's awesome. It's also funny too, the upstate is 60 miles north, like anywhere else in the world, people were like, oh yeah, that's just over there. That's the other town. But you're like, no, it's basically Canada, outside the city for most New Yorkers. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and it depends on who you ask. Cause once you're up in the Hudson Valley, I don't live upstate. Upstate is like Rochester, Buffalo. Like they would just laugh I said I live upstate, so I live in the valley. And I just say I'm a valley girl now. So
I love that.
I'm like, I'll call myself a valley girl.
That's hilarious. I shot my first wedding. It was supposed to be in DC, but then their family's from Hudson Valley, and I shot just like a little elopement, basically, somewhere in Hudson Valley. It was on a river. I don't know. And it was gorgeous. And I was like, this is sick. This is super cool. So, yeah. Okay, awesome. What is your pre-COVID? We'll kind of use that as a gauge. Like, what does your kind of workload look like for, you and Mike or your team, and this is not necessarily, I always like kind of diving into the nitty gritty and literally asking like, how do you guys make money? But like, is that 50 weddings for the whole team? Is that 150 weddings for the whole team? What's that kind of look like? Or what's your sweet spot if you've found it, at least like pre-COVID?
The purpose of a team is to like make money, right? Like, why would I bring off all other levels of stress?
Yeah.
and management duties. So yeah, I have no problem talking about numbers. So I find that like our sweet spot goal for full weddings, up to like 8-9 hour packages is 20 per year per photographer.
Okay.
That's just like a comfort level, but we always say that, but I would say we all usually go between 20 and 25.
Yeah.
You always get like the ones that are like, oh, I gotta take this wedding. Yeah. And then of course there's like a lot of micro weddings now in between Fridays and Wednesdays, like random. But definitely I'd say 20 per person is a solid guarantee for each of
That's
us.
cool.
Yeah. And then the way that we structure the finances of that is that we pay our photographers 50% of it.
Okay.
So they're getting half of it. And then on top of it, we want them to edit. So when they
Wow.
edit their photos, we pay them per image to edit as well. Because I'd rather pay them to do it than outsource it to some
Yeah.
person who I can't like have one-on-one training with. And then, their responsibilities with that are they're doing a portrait session because we gift that to all of our clients.
Yeah.
So that's included. That's part of their pay. They're doing a lot of the communication. So once they meet with the client, they always meet them on the meeting. We don't do their meetings for them.
Okay.
We want them to connect. We do like an initial phone call to go over like any like contractual or like COVID questions, like legal stuff.
Sure.
But when it comes to booking, I want them to have a Zoom with them. And if my photographer is like, hey, I don't click with them, we don't also need to book that client. I want them to like really vibe.
Yeah, to be pumped.
Super on both ends. So they're responsible for that. And then they stay in the communication with them throughout the whole like timeline and all that stuff.
Wow.
And they go from there. So all of our photographers like feel very connected and excited about their couples because they know them better than I do, as they should.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's the structure of how we,
Split
ask
finances.
them to be involved and split the finances. So yeah, so they get half of it and we take the other half, and that other half basically pays our taxes. So
Yeah.
that's the way I see it is, when I say that when it scaled it back to just me and Mike, and I was like, we should bring somebody else on, that somebody else was Danny, and the income he brings, the business side alone, covers our business taxes and our health insurance from the business pay. Mm-hmm. And Amber, we have a studio manager who handles all of our contracts. She does a lot. She handles our contracting, our invoicing. She blogs for us. She does awesome. Album design. She pins. She does a lot of stuff. So to pay for her salary as well. So Danny, is what he brings in helps cover that load.
That's cool.
Anything else beyond that, like Caroline and Emily coming on, that's just more business income. And I'm just trying to figure out more ways to spend that.
Yeah. I love that. You can let's host a retreat in the Catskills, and like do a little fun thing. That's cool. That makes sense. I love, so I know I did a lot of work when we were hiring on our people, and it's one of those things that we're still new to it. Like our plan was to do it in 2020, and then of course COVID hit, which is like a blessing and a curse because, I say last year was like a bull bear market. So like nobody wanted to get married last year once they had that feeling. But there were so many reschedules, we could kind of like cover each other and like give them work that, or if I wasn't available because I already booked a new wedding that day. But if our old couple wanted that date, I'd say, oh, we can put a team member on that. And like, that's the turnkey solution as long as like, it's okay.
Yes. And it was like a lot of the couples, right, were so like, thank you. Yeah. Just so glad they weren't losing money.
Yeah, exactly.
And still having somebody from your team, like they trust your brand.
Yeah.
That actually like really, for us too, like really solidified like, wow, our couples truly do trust everybody on our team. They were just like, I don't care who you send, like I trust your brand.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's like, wow, cool.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. It like kind of made us feel like we actually did something.
Right. Okay. Totally. Yeah. Well, you need during those like tough times, like you need somebody that you trust, right? And you need to know that somebody has your back, and like it's our job to try and do that as much. But I love hearing.
One thing though, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
One other thing that I was going to say was like when we have this extra work from other photographers that bring in extra income, we also started paying ourselves a salary for management.
Yeah.
So on top of Mike and I getting paid for shoot our own work, we literally made a huge list of all the responsibilities we have. We sat down one day and just wrote everything we do, just blobbed it out.
Love it.
And it was mind blowing of like, wow, we do a lot. We need to pay ourselves a management salary.
Yeah.
So just if you're not doing that,
I love
It's
that.
good.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Well, that goes into like I assume you guys are an S core as well. Like once you hit that level, yeah, that's what you want. That's awesome. That's really funny. That when you realize how much you do, it's insane. And then even with a studio manager, and the list is still long for you, like that's a big deal. It was really cool. I've never heard. I don't know if you were doing this in 2017, but if you were, that's awesome. I've never heard of photographers, like associates, if you will, we'll call them, or team members, doing all the culling and editing themselves. Like I love that. Do you kind of is that part of the gist of like, hey, we're going to pay you more, right? You get half, right? Which is probably more than most associates and team members, which I think is super cool. Do you do that as, one, for your workflow, and then two, do you just kind of say, hey, here's our, the Chellise Michael, starter Lightroom settings. Let's try and get close. And obviously lots of conversations, like what's that process look like? And did you always pay half, or you were like, no, we want to make this like a good, good idea?
I'm really glad you asked that question. Okay, it's two. One, yeah, if you pay your people well, they're gonna be happy and stick with you.
Yeah.
And you're gonna try hard. So that's one thing. It's just a mental. They should be paid their worth.
Yeah.
And second, if they're not culling their own work or editing their own work, they're never gonna learn from their mistakes.
Yeah.
They're just gonna I don't even know they're not gonna have any connection to their photography.
Yeah.
At all. Like that's like a second shooter mentality. Just show up, shoot, and dump a card and nothing. So no, we want them to, the only way they're going to learn to shoot, to complement our brand is to look at their work.
Yeah.
And, I would say technical stuff, most importantly, hey, this is why you can't shoot at 1.8 all day. Either you miss so many good shots because you're trying to make things creamy and pretty.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. So, there's only one way to correct that. And that's for them to see what they missed.
Yeah, totally.
And also because of our workload. So when we first started out with our first round of team, we definitely had them cull everything. So they cull, but they still give us all the originals. So I expect a Dropbox folder of your culls and your selects, and then XMPs of all your selects. And then if I find that it's a little short, or if a client comes back saying, hey, my grandmother passes or any more, I have them quickly to just jump in. And I don't have to ask the photographer for it. So, from there, sometimes there's also people that don't cull good. We've had photographers that weren't good at choosing. They were choosing things that we wouldn't have chosen and discarding things we would have.
Yeah.
So I feel like when we first brought people on, we would actually re-cull it ourselves just to see how we matched up. And we cull together, we cull on Zoom. I do everything with them. I want them to see why I chose a photo and why I don't want the photo they chose.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful. They're like, oh, cool. I remember one of our photographers a long time ago was shot very I would say Pinteresty, and spent a lot of time on shoes and dresses and not on people. And I'm like, you have so many great moments and candids of people, and why are you throwing these away? And I'm she was like, oh my God, cool. It's because who she shot for before was such a shot for magazine, hoping to be published only. And I'm we're kind of going the others. So it was great for her because she was like, oh, cool. Switch.
Yeah.
So it's important that they cull and edit. And for the editing, we give them presets. But there is a training involved with it. So right now, I have 3 shoots from one of our shooters, beginning of season, and I've kind of tweaked our presets because that's what we do all the time, right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't? So annoying. But I'm hey, everybody, tweak their presets. So I'm going to take her photos and I'm going to edit the first 20 in each section. I have her break it up in the day up.
Yeah.
And apply the preset and then give it back to her, the catalog. She takes it from there.
That's cool.
And then I check it. And so it's not too much work. And if we feel they're struggling, we just do a Zoom edit session and they watch me edit while we talk and, get there. So it's always work, but it's worth it because I don't have to do all the editing.
Yeah.
Where before we did all, our team would cull, but Mike and I edited everything.
Yeah.
And that was just absolutely insane.
That's what we do right now. So I'm like learning, but it's our first year, so we're like figuring that out, and I think the team is figuring it out. Where it's like, what do they want? And I'm a big proponent of like, trying to. They don't have to stay forever, like I would, I want them to, or if they're not a good fit, and then I don't want them to stay forever. But it's like, I don't want them to feel like they can't blossom later. But trying to figure out all these little questions, right? Of like, okay, can you use the work you shot for us? All this kind of stuff. Can you edit? Can you practice? Do you even want to though, right? Because then there's like a pride issue. If they shot for somebody else, they're like, oh, I don't even want to talk about it. But then you're like, no, you need to be motivated to make great work. So that's always weird too. But yeah, I call everything, and one of our teammates doesn't have super fast internet, so I'll like wait days to get all the raws, and I like want to just crawl into a hole. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you do something like just using smart previews and have them create the catalog, send you the catalog, you can edit it and then send it back, and then they can link it and export it?
Yeah, we could do something like that, for sure, where we, even if they called in Lightroom, like I can make Lightroom super fast. So
Yeah, the tricky part with that is that you've already have perhaps you already have the setup of like how you pay your team.
Yeah.
So if you're going to give them more responsibility,
we have to pay more. Yeah.
Like, hey, you pay them for it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I couldn't imagine doing all that anymore. I know what it feels like. I feel your pain.
No, I mean, it's a learning experience. I think I feel bad for them sometimes because I'm like, hey, we should change this thing. And they're like, okay, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, like we're building the airplane as it's in the air, but I think like my original goal was, I know so many photographers who, they used to shoot weddings, but then they couldn't handle it anymore. And those were their words. They're like, yeah, I just didn't like it. Or it was too stressful, or the workflow leading up to and after is too much, whereas like now they shoot commercial work. They're like, I show up, I edit 10 photos at the end of the day, boom, get paid, but they're great photographers. And I was like, what if I could make it? And I was kind of going the other end, but I see the vision. I see the Chellise vision. I was going the other way where I was like, all right, I'm going to pay you what I think is well, but I only want you to just shoot the couple and love on the couple, right? And like, we'll do all the workflow back end and, contract, BS, SEO, marketing, all the lists that you and Michael made. So that was my strategy at first. And I think there are times when I'm like, we might shift that, just to add more value to them. But they only have to cull and that's it. Like they cull, deliver raws, and then they're done. But at the same time, we're trying to like,
I think culling is one of the most important parts. So, again, so they can just see what they shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But perhaps you could find. We also have an in-house editor that helps us with the load, with our own load. Because again, we're checking. Even though they're editing, we still have to check it.
Yeah.
We're still going through every photo and like tweaking. So perhaps I think there's a whole nother topic on that I have of like when we have an in-house editor, and that's a whole nother like training that person, and but it's great for them because they just get like the culls. They don't have to look at all the crap, and they just like, edit everything that's pretty, and they're like, oh my god, I love this. So there's definitely that there. But I hear what you're saying, like for those photographers that just don't want to deal with all that, how can you accommodate them? But yeah, we when we hire, we specifically say you're going to edit your photos, so don't be surprised.
That's cool.
And if that's too much for you, then we don't want you on our team. But we do, our editors, they're actually more for me and Mike for our workload to help us while we check everybody else's work.
Totally.
So just manage it all.
Yeah, no, totally. I get that for sure. What are, when you're going to look for associates and hiring team members, what are some of the red flags that you guys have experienced both, prior to hiring or ones that popped up, in the midst of when they're already on the team and you go, oh, crap, or, oh, we should have changed this. Like, what are some things that you've looked out for, or who's the perfect fit for to be on a team?
Yeah, I think the perfect type, and I've said this many times, is like the people who've been there, done that, that have already shot, burnt out on it, because they respect you, or they already like, dude, you do a lot of work. I already know how much work you do.
Yeah.
Respect. I just want to shoot. Maybe shoot and edit in my case.
Yeah.
So, it's the fresh ones that come up that want to learn from you and build out their portfolio. And the way to prevent that is to put up a pretty strict contract of like, you can't use these images at all. They're copyrighted. We own them ever.
Yeah.
You never can. And so just saying that right there, usually like weeds those people out. Because they're like, well, if I can't ever post these on my own Instagram or do anything with them, no. Everything else tends to come through working with people. Like red flags will pop up like you'll see how they communicate or lack thereof communicate, or their workflow if they're delivering late or things like this. Like we're pretty kind of militant. We're like, we need to buy this because we're like running a biz here. You can't have one person's late on stuff and it's like a domino effect. Totally. Right? So I think it's important to like not throw your new person a ton of work right away, maybe a few, even though maybe you want to, and just kind of catch those feels of like, oh, they don't respond to their client within 24 hours on Monday through Friday, which is what we require. Yeah. Oh, they were late to a Zoom meeting or dressed like a schlep. These are things you just kind of got to pick up on and pay attention to. And then have I always have conversations with people and keep track of, everything's through email. Like if something was done wrong or inappropriately or lateness, it's all like, this is unacceptable. This is the email thread. Try to avoid saying text, because when it comes to having those hard conversations, you've got to have that like paper trail. And I like it. But I feel like it just kind of comes with, you got to work with people a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah. Have you ever had somebody on the team and then over time you realize, okay, maybe this isn't a good fit? Or like, how many strikes do they get on the Chellise Michael team before they're out?
I'm not many, honestly. Like, few.
Yeah.
It's like you get a good warning and a talk to, and then after that, I just went on time for that. Yeah. And I feel like, especially with our industry, like you could be stuck with them for 2 years because they might have contracts way in the future. Yeah. So I just am like hard no. But Mike and I are really open and honest, and we're not mean. We try to lift people up. And I think the way you talk to people is very lifting, and everybody's got their, different personalities and different, attitudes. And like, it also, I don't know how to explain it, but everybody's got to be treated differently. You got to like learn them. Yeah. And like how they like to receive. How they communicate, how they listen. And so it's all very sensitive with each person. So we have to when we have talks with them, it's very open and honest. I don't think I've ever been a terrible, there's definitely been really terrible talks. I don't want to actually take that back, but they've all been very heartfelt and honest and open. Yeah. And like, I don't feel that there's any bad blood with anybody that's not with us anymore.
That's cool.
So
yeah. I wasn't trying to spill any tea. I was just kind of curious, of like what that looks like, for sure. Because it's complicated, right? And photographers have ego in general, and including us, at some level. And like, how many photographers does it take to change a light bulb? One, but 99 will say, hey, I could have done that, And so, we get it. But I think too, has your mindset shifted? And you don't have to tell me a number, but I feel like I shot my first wedding 10 years ago, and I was not full time then by any means, but I've been full time for like 7 years in, a big city, not New York size, but a big city, and I'm making it, right? And I'm like the dumb, non-pretty, non-light and airy, whatever, in a very light and airy city. But we're making it. But as I've like gotten older, once I hit 30, I'm 32 now, I stopped caring about a lot of like the BS. Like once my business I knew could work and keep working and was like attracting the kind of people that I wanted to hang out with, my clients started aging up, all that kind of stuff. I felt a lot more comfortable and just like, okay, and not resting by any means. Like it's still hard work, but like, okay, I can see the next 10 years a lot easier than I saw the last 2 years, as you're like building. Like, do you and Mike feel like that's kind of been the thing, like when you first moved to Brooklyn versus, the last few years, at least pre-COVID?
Yeah, the first 2 years are like you're a little nervous and like, am I gonna be able to keep up and get enough bookings? I mean, there's so many photographers, so much talent.
Yeah.
But then there gets to a point, especially when you have a team and you're like clearly clearing over 100 weddings a year.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, I think we're on some sort of autopilot in a good way in terms of getting inquiries and stuff. And I still feel like we have that. And we definitely don't have to like hustle and grind as hard. And I think you shouldn't have to do that. Like
Yeah.
after, 10 years, you should be
Feeling
established.
good. Yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't need to overdo it. So congratulations.
No, it wasn't about me. I was mostly just kind of curious for you and Mike, how things have like shifted, mindset wise. Cause I feel like I talk to so many newbie photographers with the podcast and like our education stuff that we've been building up in our Facebook group and stuff. And, their number one concern is either getting inquiries or booking the inquiries they get, right? Those are, I guess are their number two concerns.
Totally.
And it's like, for a long time, that was our struggle too, right? Like we were always like, I hope we get booked, you send the pricing or whatever, the phone call, and we're like, I hope it happens. And then you get like mature. And I've been doing a lot of work on this with the last like 2 years with this guy, Sam Jacobson, on all the data behind all of our industry. And I'll give you like a crazy stat. So let's say you do everything perfect, right? Like SEO, your website's laid out good, contact page, UI, services, you meet on the phone call, custom proposal, like even if you don't do that, but let's say that's like the ideal, all this stuff, everything. And we're still on the high end only supposed to book 1/5 of everything that comes in, like 20% or less, like that is bonkers to me. And it's like a really rough dating game, right? Like we get 4 no's for every yes. And so I've been like telling other photographers this, like, hey, you can do everything we tell you to do and you're still only going to win 1 out of every 5, which is such a weird, like, that's probably why we're all depressed. Anyway.
True. I mean, I think too, when I think about like, yeah, the maturity and like the hump of that is, I would get inquiries and when I was starting out and be so, they'd be like, you're the one, like, oh my God, and you send pricing and they're like, nothing.
Yeah.
More personally, right?
Yeah.
Where now I'm like, people will write inquiries and tell me I'm the only one and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And couldn't imagine my wedding without you. Crickets after I send pricing.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, they say that to everybody.
Yeah.
They're trying to warm up and, compliment our work, and that's great. But like in the reality, we're just being priced against our competitors.
Totally.
And that's okay. In some cases, not at all. Some cases, I'm the only one they met with and they booked me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've gotten there is a comfort in it. I think it comes with maturity of just like not taking it personal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, not saying we've gotten lazy on autopilot, but I'm just confident because of if I noticed our inquiries coming in were like on a serious decline, then I'd get my ass back out there and
totally,
reconnect and stuff. But when I was younger and young in the game and not super busy, I was so obsessed with just networking, connecting that I don't even think I realized how hard I was hustling.
Yeah.
Until a few years ago when I was like, I need to chill out. Like this is, it's heavy on you to like stress that much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was like, I had to stop going to so many social things and networking things is kind of wearing me down.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I feel like there's a weird uphill flow and then you're like, oh,
yeah. Like you now, well, I think it's something I always say is like, when you're starting out, you're worried about getting from 0 to 1. And then now you get to this place where it's like, okay, I'm thinking about how to get from 8 to 9 or 9 to 10, maybe if we're lucky, by the end of our lives. So you're like, man, the jump from 8 to 9 is so long. It's much longer than 0 to 1. And it's like, are you familiar with like karate, black belts, and at least how the belt system works?
I don't know what all the belts are, but I do understand that
Okay.
you move up in belt
Yeah.
colors.
So again, this is like I also don't know that much, but this is what I know, and this is like a good analogy. Is like you start out in your white belt, right? Everybody's a white belt. When I took Tung Sudo, I was with the 5-year-olds, right? So you just see this old guy with a beard, like hanging out with kids, and we're just kicking and punching and saying, yelling, and but when you get your black belt, after you've ranked up and you do all these testing and all these kind of stuff, it usually, if somebody rushed, they could get a black belt in a year, right? But it usually takes a while. But after that, it's no longer an achievement based requirement, it's time based. And to go get your first degree or your second degree after you get your black belt is 6 years. And the one from the second to the third is 12 years. And the one from third
Wow.
to fourth is, 15 years or whatever. And that's what I think about all the time is like, okay, we get to black belt level, right? We hang out. You and Mike and I are hanging out. One, we're in different markets, but two, like once I started not feeling like my competitor, like my colleagues were competition, I was like, oh, this feels so good. Like to just not care at all and feel very confident. And like we've all done the work on our brand, so we know why we're different. And like we could probably book some of the same couples, which I think is like a compliment to how both of our values or whatever, right? And now it's like, okay, we're all trying to get to from second to third degree. Like, what does that look like, in third to fourth degree? And so, it just, maybe that's just a testament to how old we are. But, I'm just like, oh, okay, this is what getting old in the wedding industry is like without, unless we're like Susan Stripling, or something like that. So,
Yeah, and it is something, I mean, it's interesting you bring it up and put it in that perspective because it is something that's been on my mind lately. It's like, I've been doing this long. What do I want to do next? Like,
yeah,
what is my clientele going to shift like in the next couple of years? Because I feel like that's going to shift as I get older too.
yeah,
And I think it's almost natural.
yeah, yeah. I always
It's
wonder.
like tracked.
Yeah, totally. Well, I always wonder. Actually, my buddy Ryan Brenizer out of New York City, super good guy, and then him and another guy from Pennsylvania out of Philly. They always say, I would like to keep shooting weddings my entire life, as long as I physically can. But they were like, the reality is like once our jokes stop landing, we probably know that it's probably time to get out of it. And I ask all my clients like when their birthday is, just just so we know, or we can send them like a text like, hey, it's your birthday or whatever. And I started seeing people born in the 90s, and now I'm nervous to when I see them born in 2000s, and I'm like, what is happening? But that's just reality. So I don't know.
You'll just have to start watching a bunch of like 2020
TikTok.
releases.
Yeah, we just have to hang out on TikTok all day and
Oh,
learn the dances. And I like the songs though. I'm like pushing DJs really hard. I'm like, guys, these are like the most modern songs in the world right now. You should play these. Like, like the Cupid Shuffle. Let's get rid of it, please. Like, but that's actually another guy made a joke about the pandemic and all, wedding photographers being off, and they were like, I never thought I would miss Bruno Mars. you're like, damn. Or Ed Sheeran or anything like that. Okay. What is I want to ask you a little bit, what does 2021 look like for you guys now? Like coming out of COVID, all this kind of stuff. Is it busier than normal? Like it all depends on what their strategy was in 2020. So I've been asking people like, is it busier than it should be, but less money? Is it normal? Did you guys make good decisions? What's that look like for you and the team?
okay. We moved about 70 weddings.
I don't feel bad anymore now.
um, Caroline came in and helped, swoop up some. Honestly, it's crazy. She only had to cover, I think, 4 or 5 collectively
Mm,
for me, Mike. For like, I think she's picking up one for each of us that we couldn't be there because we'd already booked another one.
mm,
But for the most part, a lot of our couples were cool and chose a Friday, chose an off day.
yeah.
Um, Downsized, did a mini wedding during the week.
Yeah.
Um, so we moved everything
Mm,
to 21 and 22. Some of them, I feel like we still have about 5. They're just like, hey, we're just going to wait. We're just going to pause.
mm,
I'm like, cool, got your money. Like, talk to me when you figure out your future.
yeah.
And we'll go from there. We decided